Okay, let's start. All right, so I'm Raj Samtani. Guys, welcome to After Lunch, this great panel on watermarking. I can see we've got some watermarking groupies in the room, but anyway. So I have been in this space now for going on 16 years, in content protection, DRM, watermarking, anti-piracy. Worked with several companies in the space. This is about the right time, I think, given where we are in the market, to bring this topic for the first time to a show like streaming media. Basically, you see that there's three things happening in this space that I think are pertinent. We've got higher fidelity content coming down the pike in terms of going from SD to HD and now to UHD slash HDR type content. The windows are starting to shrink in the marketplace, and we're having day and date availability across regions, and we're moving from managed services to OTT. And what this is doing is sort of, I think it's created a perfect storm for the pirates out there to continue to run their growing businesses based on content that they haven't licensed or acquired legally. The ripping tools and the ability to camcord off of very high fidelity rendering devices just makes things a lot easier to make a lot of money in the pirate channels based on premium content from studios and sports content. And so, you know, these days, if you go to some of these pirate sites, based on the fragmentation in terms of what's available out there on apps and skinny bundles, etc., you end up seeing that the pirate channels are about the only places where you can get everything for free. And so, as a result of this high fidelity content with shrinking windows and the move from managed services to OTT, a couple of years ago, Movie Labs came up with a set of requirements that essentially created enhanced content protection guidelines that included forensic watermarking. And so what we wanted to do was bring this to the attention of the community that comes to a show like streaming media, and talk about some of the sort of benefits of watermarking, as well as some of the challenges in implementing this technology. So we've assembled a great panel from companies that are in the value chain and in this complex ecosystem to talk about sort of how we're going to get past some of the complexity and try to find a way to better align the incentives in the marketplace. And so we want to bring out those points and have this discussion freely in the market. And if you look at the end-to-end process to embed a watermark and then detect it, there's a whole bunch of technologies, solutions, and services along the way that need to come together with the parties in the ecosystem to make this work. So we're going to start this panel by asking each of the three gentlemen here to introduce themselves very briefly, and then what we will do is go into a few moderated questions from me. The group is small enough that if you do have a burning question, just raise your hand and we'll interact during the panel rather than leaving the questions for the end. So with that, what I'll do is I'll start with Lawrence and ask you to take a moment to introduce yourself and your relevance to your company and your own relevance to the topic.
Okay, Raj, thank you, and thank you to the Digital Watermarking Alliance for sponsoring this panel. Again, I think, as you said, Raj, this is a very timely discussion on digital watermarking. I'm Lawrence Lowe. I'm the VP of Business Development and Sales at Odetto, and I've been in this area for over 13 years. And Odetto, for those of you who are not familiar with us, we are a world-leading digital platform security company. And our philosophy in content protection is to take the 360-degree view of protecting content. So it's not just encryption with conditional access and DRM mechanisms. It's also being able to inject forensic watermarking into content and then detect that content when it is eventually pirated, so that we are able to create a cycle that Raj was indicating of protecting and renewing content. Because with watermarking you get valuable forensics, but with the detection you get the actionability and the ability to take those forensics and restore the security.
Great, thanks, Lawrence. Eric?
I'm Eric Deal. I'm in this field for more than 25 years. So I was previously, in my previous life, I was working more on creating systems. Now, for 2 years, I joined Sony Pictures, where I'm VP Security on New Technology, where I'm now using these technologies. Watermark is one of the key elements of our toolbox to protect content. Watermark will be one of the elements which is mandatory for us to enable renewability of security, because by definition, law number one, attackers will find their way. So we have to discover their way and then patch the thing. Watermark will help us to do that.
So I'm Philippe Stransky, CTO at Nagra. So Nagra is a provider of CAS, DRM, and now watermarking technology through the acquisition of LexGuard this summer. I'm in this business since only 20 years. And it feels like we are sitting here as dinosaurs when we see what's happening out there on this OTT world, but probably there are some lessons to be learned from dinosaurs. So let's work on that and talk about that. Our focus is obviously to embrace watermarking and use watermarking to help us detect illegal redistribution of content. But even more important, our focus is to make it as painless as possible. Introducing watermarking in an operation, until today at least, has never been very easy. And we'll discuss how we will make that an easy path, but it will take a little bit of time.
Well, thank you. The other thing I deliberately did is assemble this panel with 3 very unique accents. So, given that what we are facing is a global problem, I think this panel is actually a good microcosm of the fact that we have to deal with this at a global level. So to start with, what I'd like to do is have Eric, being that you're at the head end of this value chain, now that you're at Sony Pictures, to kind of give us a definition of what the term session-based watermarking. It would be helpful to set the stage with that.
Okay, so I will introduce 2 notions. The first one, okay, the watermark, okay, you all know, I guess, what watermark is. It's embedding an information in an imperceptible way. At least we always speak about imperceptible. In our domain, there are mainly 2 reasons why to do at 2 levels. But I want to introduce the first one. The first one is what I call the licensee watermark, or the master watermark. Is a watermark that we are embedding in a content prior that we are giving that to the distributor. This first level allows us, whenever we get a leak, to know from which channel it was extracted. And then there is a session-based watermark, or sometimes called forensics watermark, I think the vocabulary is a watermark which is embedded when the distributor is providing that to the end user. That means the information which is carried by the session-based watermark, the information which could be retrieved from a session-based watermark are some information which are related to the end user, or not necessarily the end user, or the device which was used to render the content. And so the term session-based was because at one period, the payload, that means the information which was there, was a session number. And from the session number, then the provider. But it's not necessarily a session. Was
Okay.
the explanation
Yeah,
clear?
so it's not necessarily a session from a streaming media kind of definition
No.
of a session. What it is a definition of the actual transaction, the viewing event that took place.
The purpose, it's more, I qualify that more the purpose, the goal of why we embed this information. It's really to retrieve an information about the device. Some people want the user and so on, which knows when the content on by whom or what the content has been rendered.
So to follow up on that, you know, in order to get to this level, can we talk a little bit, Eric, about some successes that the industry has had by already using watermarking and some of the other mechanisms that you described earlier, like the distribution watermark you talked about?
Well, by definition, I think we have two venues of success. Success. Unfortunately, we have to use them. But the first one is the Digital Cinema Initiative, DCI. All projectors of digital cinema are embedding a watermark inside, which means that whenever there is a capture on, unfortunately that happened, a camcorder inside a theater, not only do we know which screen it was, but we know also the timestamp when it happens. After that, if we see that on a repeated way for the same theaters, then we may question and have some discussion, interesting discussion with the owner. What happens also is when we have the Academy Awards or the Screener Award, usually we are watermarking the content uniquely for each recipient. That means when there are some leaks, there are some, if you look in the internet, you will find some very public information about that. Okay, sometimes there are information which are leaking out, and we know who was at the initiative, who was the recipient of the content which was leaking. It was not necessarily this person, it may be his son, his daughter, or his assistant who did the leak, but we know from where it comes.
So has that been successful to date? I mean, I noticed that at the beginning of this 2016, during Oscar season, we had a whole slew of these very screeners that leaked.
So successful in the fact that we were able to retrieve who or from where it was coming. Was it a deterrent? If the success is a deterrent, it seems it's not sufficient. But yes, by definition, it's one of the things is, you know what, and that's one of the things with the watermark. We may have all the information. Now the second part is what will we do with this information? And then that's a legal business discussion, which is
maybe let me add to that, because at the end, the watermark is an information that we retrieve, that we detect, if the content has not been damaged enough so that it can never be retrieved. And in fact, usually with a little bit of effort and a video magic, you retrieve probably 95% of the cases. So for everybody that is listening, we will be able to retrieve the payload, which means that we can understand what happened to the content. Now, this tracking mechanism is already applied in the pay TV business and with some other form of content marking for sports rights and sports distribution. At the end, using this information to track what happened to the content and track the illegal distribution network is something that companies like Irdeto and Nagra can do. And the watermark is only another way to add this information that is highly needed. Of course, if you talk about linear TV, having from time to time a black screen at 2 a.m. doesn't annoy too much the viewers. Having a black screen on Sony content probably is not something that is acceptable. But at the end, finding information that helps us identifying the path that the content follow is really the most important.
And if I can add something to that as well, Raj, I think we're really at the beginning of realizing the potential of digital watermarking, whether it's forensic marking or whether it's distribution marking. I think the more ubiquitous we can make the insertion of watermarking as painless. I think, as Philippe was saying, if we can make that simple, painless, and the payload that we recover useful, then the more ecosystems, the more platforms where we can embed the watermark, safeguard privacy, all these other issues that are associated with watermarking, the information that the distributors, that the content owners, and the other participants in the value chain can derive from that, and then improve security in the ecosystem, as well as provide other signaling in terms of how that content is being consumed. So I think we're really just touching the surface of what the potential for digital watermarking is.
Okay. So let's talk about that a little bit more, Lawrence. You just talked about the potential. I mean, the purpose ostensibly of these technologies is to try to put a dent in the unauthorized, unmonetized distribution.
Right.
Right. So how can we create these solutions in a way that can actually meet that purpose? So talk a little bit about this end-to-end perspective that you just alluded to.
So again, I think the solutions that we have are able to embed the watermarking through the conditional access systems that we protect, as well as in the DRM systems for OTT delivery. And combined with our monitoring service, we are able to provide that, again, 360-degree view of what happens to that content through that distribution cycle. When illegal consumption takes place and emerges in a live stream, it's being protected by our conditional access system, there's some actions that we can take there. If it comes from an OTT system and there's enough information that resolves back to a subscriber, there's some pretty direct actions that you can take in that context. I think the value in understanding what sort of piracy impact from different distributors is another key value that we are able to provide with our monitoring and business intelligence services. So again, these are the building blocks for how we can inform what's happening in the marketplace, and in other ecosystems where we can embed detailed forensics on how the circumvention occurred. That provides that feedback where we can use that to again renew the security in those ecosystems.
So let's move on to this topic of this 4K UHD HD plus HDR. There's a lot of little mini acronyms thrown around. What I equated is that it's a higher fidelity content than what we have today that requires some additional content protection rules in the licensing arrangement. So where are we with that? Philippe, maybe both Eric and you can take a stab at this. Where do you think we are with being able to implement some of the guidelines that are in the Movie Lab's ECP document?
Yes. So fortunately now we have 4K Ultra HD, which allows the industry to develop and deploy brand new hardware, new 4K TVs, new 4K set-top boxes, new 4K players, etc. And this is exactly what we needed to now take seriously implementation of watermarking. Of course, with the push of movie labs and the studios behind. I remember our first demos of watermarking on a booth at IBC or NAB was probably 2004 or 2007. And you know what? It's complicated. It's intrusive. It's complicated. And there is a whole cycle. And now we have this opportunity of being able to do the things right. It's not done. It's only starting, but we have this brand new type of content which allows us now to have everybody aligned and be able to seriously talk about it and implement it. So in all these new players, set-top boxes, and so on, there is always now a place for watermarking. A good driver also was the Ultra HD Forum, where we have security working group. And I think it's the first time that we had this delicate environment of competitors that have to align on some interfaces just to make sure that we make it, again, as painless as possible to the industry, encoder vendors and others who have to implement this technology. And again, this is only starting, but I think if we continue the effort and make sure that we do not forget any element in the chain, we have to maybe work on the next cycle of some hardware components, but in 18 months, max 24 months from now, it's almost done.
Well, I like your optimism. And speaking of the UHD forum, just as a little plug for this next panel, there's going to be a discovery track panel at 3:10 in the Grand Ballroom Salon A, which is being put together by our friends at Verimatrix and NextGuard to talk about that very activity that Philippe just mentioned. And I want to thank Graham Oakes, who's in the audience here, the chairman of the DWA, for helping to set this whole thing up, as Lawrence mentioned earlier. That discovery track will get a little bit more into the weeds of what the work that has gone on in that UHD forum and the output of that recent effort between competitors who have had to get together and collaborate on what we can do with this in an effort to create some standardized interfaces and some business practices that can be aligned. I also want to point out that a company based in France, Content Armor, Alain is sitting in front here. He's also been a part of that, and I think if you guys are interested in watermarking, there's going to be some very, very good points that are going to be raised this afternoon at 3:10. So I'd encourage all of you to attend that session. So to move on, sorry about that big plug. Eric, the same topic in terms of the sort of 4K UHD content protection, the licensing regime behind that. So how, and Philippe alluded to this, so how are the DRM and the CAS systems that we work with today for security, how are they accommodating these requirements, and you know, are we actually seeing some of this stuff come to pass? And I know these are some sensitive topics, so you may not be able to get too detailed, but if you can at least allude to the progress that's been made.
The Movie Labs, the ECP document, has a set of requirements on, yes, now the major CA vendors are now aligned with quite all of these requirements on, yes, there are already solutions which are quite, we could say, which we are happy to have. On Watermark, all of them are either because they acquired that, but in any case, all of them are ready to interface with the Watermark solution. On the role in that case of the DRM or CA, if ever the Watermark is done inside the set-top box, is to securely provide the payload to be put, or to manage that at the head end, because okay, there was also a solution where the Watermark can be done either inside the box or at the head end. And I think that one of the big things which was done in the recent years, which made that also now it's possible to do that at a reasonable cost on reasonable complexity, is that it's also possible to do that at the head end, not necessarily inside the box. And the technologies now are really mature in order to do that easily. So I think we are at a period, we have a new brand of content, a new breed of content with high value that we, the studio, wanted to have a higher protection. We have now better hardware, more secure, because we have more than 25 years of piracy behind us, and we have learned how to thwart piracy on the physical level. And we have now a new generation of watermark technologies or solutions which are easy now to implement. 10 years ago, it was complex, it was not simple. Now, it's far, far easier. And there is not an excuse saying it's too complex. It's not anymore true. So we have all this which are coming together, which should give us a brighter future if we do not screw anything inside this chain. Right. Sorry for the word.
No, that makes sense. So again, shifting a little bit and talking about how we're going to be accommodate. You alluded to the dealing with things in different geographies. So how can we make sure that these operators, whether they are MVPDs or over-the-top distributors, how can we ensure that the capital investments that they're asked to make to implement this technology in their footprint is future-proofed and protected? I mean, we're asking these people to come in and make these investments. How can we be assured that it's actually going to pay off for everybody in the value chain? Lawrence, you want to take a stab at that?
Well, I think one way of approaching that is taking, again, what we believe in is a centralized approach to Watermark. So it is a head-end delivery system, head-end-based system that Eric mentioned, and we see lots of benefits in deploying in that manner because you are able to minimize the capital investment. You are able to better integrate into the operator workflows, whether it's a conditional access or an OTT operator. And you're able to ensure better security of that going forward. It provides a point where you can update the technology. And again, what's happening in the industry, there's lots of great new research and new technology that becomes available. And having that centralized approach, I think allows, makes it a palpable investment for the operator, for the distributor.
Philip, want to add to that, just in terms of helping them protect the investment?
So obviously, the more we deploy, the more painful it will be for illegal redistribution, and there should be a direct benefit to that. We'll not elaborate on who would really want to pay for content, but at least it is already proven that simply mentioning the fact that the content can be watermarked or is probably watermarked reduces the level of piracy. And this is good. This is good. Now we have also to prove and demonstrate that things are actually happening. And I also want to make sure that we are not focusing only on end users and user IDs. And this is, here we have to be cautious because at the end, 90% of the illegal viewers, or 95, they just don't know that they are doing something completely illegal. If you look at some websites, VOD platforms, their look is very professional, and you pay, and you give your credit card number, and the poor consumer, poor, they have to pay, but in addition they pay, they just don't know that they are doing something illegal. So it gives the opportunity to use watermark, as Laurent said, at network level, so that we can identify the distribution networks. And we have examples of networks that were identified and taken down. And this is really, behind that there is criminal activity, clearly. And the last example that we had, we took down a network of illegal redistribution. And behind that, there were 500 brands of set-top boxes that were connecting to illegal websites. And this is the magnitude of the piracy that could happen. And shutting down that, the entire network, is far more important than just addressing one or the other one per subscriber that is at the end of the chain. And because of data privacy, this has to be very clear. Our first focus will be really in identifying the networks and not the individual.
So that's like fake Steve Jobs, but this would be fake Roku, huh?
we could.
Something like that. Anyway, no,
I'd like to
Go ahead,
add
Eric.
another argument about protecting, because here had the distribution networks. On another benefit that the distributor may have is, okay, in some cases, it's the box itself which has been hacked there are some flaws. Now, if we know that the distributor has a flawed box, but we don't know which version and so on, and we just know that it's coming from there, our schedule, that means our licensing contract with them, gives us the possibility to either shut down the service or give them a lower resolution. Now, if through the watermark we are able to detect which box, which version of the software has been hacked on a regular way, rather than shutting down the service or coming there, we just go to the manufacturer, say, hey, here is an issue with this box. We find the patch, we patch it, and we renew the security. So watermark is an enabler for us because it allows to detect not the user, but the box which has been used, which has been hacked. I would say the model of box, because it's not only the box, it's more there. And then we can come back to fixing that. And then you will continue to have 4K in your service, and you will not be going down to 1080. Mm-hmm. So that's also one benefit of using watermark, because it allows us to find the models which have been breached.
So you're still got that view of keeping honest people honest and not necessarily going after.
Not necessarily.
Yeah. So this is coming back to something that Philippe said earlier in terms of trying to get a shared sense of outcomes with respect to piracy deterrence. I want all of you to share your perspective on this topic, which is, are we ever going to see a technology like watermarking get beyond being something that you must comply with, rather than something that we can all say, hey, this is really working for the industry to help us as we go down and implement some of these secular things that I talked about in my intro, where you've got higher resolution content and you've got these shrinking windows in the market, and you're going from managed to over-the-top type services. Are we ever going to see everybody come together and realize that, it's not just agreeing to a licensing, regime, a mandate, but to say, yes, this shared sense of that this thing works. Maybe Eric, you can start with that. Because I think, again, you guys are the ones that are evangelizing the use of these technologies.
I think it's about evangelizing. If we are able, it's two things. It's evangelizing, making understand to the distributors the advantage they are. So some of them are the one we were saying. Okay, we may perhaps also have some discussion at the business levels on making some incentive. I think coming that, but that's business discussion, so out of the scope of this discussion today. But yes, it's a lot about education and so on making understand that the interests are aligned. As long as it's perceived as a pain in the ass, we will not go there. But it's something that if everybody is using, it's for the benefit of all the actors of the chain. And that means that all the actors of the chain should understand that, okay, piracy hits everybody, and everybody is hurt by that.
And you're making it less of a pain in the ass. So.
Exactly, so painless. But I think this is really a first step that needs to happen, because there are other content providers who find value in watermarking. I was mentioning sports rights. The monetization model is different, but at the end, along the chain, there is always somebody who benefits from being able to trace the content. Hey, I paid these rights, and my neighbor is streaming it, and therefore I don't get the revenue because they overlap with my customers, and that doesn't work. We are tracing today everything for the good or for the worse, but mostly for the good. There is no reason why we should not be able to trace content. And for sports, and here we talk about billions each year that are put on the table. the fact that we are completely or almost completely blind is just not acceptable.
I just saw an article just recently that the outside Europe rights for soccer, football, just from the EPL was 850 million pounds, which even at today's depressed pound is still, it's still a pretty big amount of money for the non-European rights. So that's some serious money involved, as you pointed out. Yeah. Now, how does that work in the sports realm?
Well, today it's mainly driven by these operators, these pay TV operators, who put billions for 3 years of exclusive rights, if they are exclusive, and they are really driving the show, and they suffer. I mean, they enjoy the pain of doing it. Now, they have very specific also requirements. The value of sports content after an hour and a half is close to zero. So from a technical point of view, although we can implement the exact same mechanisms, we have to remember that the detection time is maybe 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and if it's more than that, then you start to be in trouble, and maybe it's not that useful. I'm sure that if Eric is able to identify a cinema after 3 days of work, probably it's sufficient. For sports, we don't have 3 days. So we also have this fine-tuning that needs to be done, and many are working on that as we speak.
Lawrence, is that your experience too in the sports realm?
Yeah, no, look, in the sports realm, we absolutely, the speed of detection is key. And I think that there's a number of different techniques that we've been able to deploy that really get that detection time to a level where we can get the precision that you're looking for from watermarking, and to take this specific action against the bad actor. Mm-hmm. So it is protecting all the good users from the bad actor, and that's the having that precision and being able to get that in a very short amount of time is the key, and a key value from protecting that sports right.
But isn't there two components to that? One is that you have to be able to start monitoring right as that game is going on. You have to start monitoring these sites.
Absolutely.
and then bring down, and then you have the actual running the detector, but you have to actually find the rogue stream.
Exactly, and again, that goes back to the 360-degree view that we have on content protection. Again, it's managing the insertion of the mark. Again, depending on the content, for sports content, it is different from cinematic content, and to have that process detection of that illegal content, whether it's on a streaming platform or an illegal IPTV streaming box. Mm-hmm. We are tracking over 950 illegal IPTV streaming boxes. So these are directly competitive to legitimate OTT services, and where consumers are being fooled into paying $15 to $20 a month. So real money for. And having that mechanism to detect the signal from those different threats, and then being able to take action on those specific bad actors. That's the level of coordination and orchestration you need in that ecosystem to get that impact.
Okay, well, we have 5 minutes to go. If there's any questions from the audience, maybe this would be a good time for us to, anybody? No? Okay. I'm glad it was all done very, explained it quite well. So let's do this. Let's talk about, if we have a panel such as this a year from now at this great Hyatt, where will we be? Will we start seeing some success stories in this B2C world of watermarking? We know that we've had success with digital cinema. We've had success with some post-production environments. We've had success with the e-screeners that Eric, you talked about. But as we get into this world of delivering HD plus content, more greater than HD, will we see some benefits that can help us manage the ROI of piracy deterrence better using watermarking in a year, you think? Eric?
Oh, I'm confident that we will see some deployment. I hope that we will not have to use them and that we will be better than the pirate, but I can always dream. But yes, I'm quite confident that next year we will have some successful deployment.
That's great.
Yes, I think in a year from now, we will also be able to explain how you can implement watermarking at a minimal cost. There is still a lot of work to be done. We mentioned the encoder vendors earlier, set-top box vendors. This is also something that is happening now, and their next version of their chipsets will support watermarking from day one. So you just have to activate it, and it's there. For OTT networks, this is something we need to work on, to be very clear. So in a year from now, we should be clever enough to reach some good successes. And operationally, we also have to do a little bit of work also among ourselves, technology providers, because we have to provide ways to at least be able to find out that possibly there is a mark. Otherwise, you will have to close a contract with each technology vendor, and that doesn't work. So this is something that in a year from now we need to solve absolutely. Have some more interoperability in terms of interfaces among different technologies.
Okay, Lawrence?
I think in a year from now, we'll see some, we'll see some deployments. And I think we'll see a greater realization as to how the appreciation of watermarking technology as an enabler. So it will, what we're fundamentally looking at is to enable innovation in the products that we provide consumers. That's why we're all here. If watermarking enables different product to be licensed in the marketplace to allow different windows, that's with high levels of security, with rapid renewability. I think those capabilities to the market in the industry is really important to enable us to deliver better product to the consumers, better experiences on a wide variety of screens.
But to press on the point that you just made, Philippe, the idea is that you've got multiple technologies and you've got multiple distributors that may be using, plurality of technologies, and one leak is available to the whole world. And the point that Philippe, I think, was making was that the industry needs to come to some level of orchestration to be able to help each other, help us all operationally understand which detector to use. Otherwise, these monitoring companies would have to be running 20 different detectors, or 5 or 7 or whatever it is, in order to successfully deliver their service. So will we see that? You think there's things that are happening in the marketplace? I mean, I know we've got a panel to go to in just 40 minutes from now that'll talk about the start of that. But will we see more activity like that?
So technically, I don't see any issue in being able to send any content to any cloud service, and the return will be that this content has been distributed through these and these networks and has been viewed by this device or this individual. In a year from now, it shall even be able to detect the watermarks that we are able to stack during the lifetime of the content. And this is something that is more maybe financial, commercial than technical. But we have to, there is no reason why we don't have shared interest in solving that and going there.
Okay.
Rajan, to
Yes.
that point,
Yeah.
when you mentioned that it's 3 to 5 minutes for detection for watermarking, would it not make sense to do some sort of partnerships with ACR technologies? I'm without the magic, obviously, but where that would make some sense to do a quicker detection, and then we can also track and see where it came from by the.
This is yes, absolutely. You have that. There is also the visible marker, the visible fingerprint that you have for EPL or in India or Africa. So it's really a sum of things that all together makes that it can be very, very fast. Yes, absolutely.
So using the forensics for very quick analysis and business intelligence that you can then drill down further if you need to.
Yeah, so and also the infrastructure, if you have to detect something in Africa where you have probably no Wi-Fi in the area, then it's easier to use a cell phone and report a number that shows up on the screen. But that's part of the big content, all illegal content distribution tracking efforts that we are doing. Yeah.
Good.
So
Thanks.
yes, absolutely.
That was a good point. Yeah. So I think with that, I'm going to ask you all to help me thank the panel, and we'll move on to the coffee break and some networking, and hopefully there's some additional questions that you might have that the panelists can answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.